Introducing our first speaker for the day, Mr. Ashish Chauhan, MD and CEO, Bombay Stock Exchange Limited, BSE Limited. Ashish currently works as MD and CEO of BSE, the first stock exchange in India. BSE is ranked as the largest exchange in the world in terms of the number of stocks listed. Ashish has been given the Distinguished Alumnus Award for the year 2014 by the IIT Bombay, his alma mater. He has been ranked amongst the 60 most influential Gujaratis of the world for the last 2 consecutive years by Chitralekha, the largest selling Gujarati magazine in the world again. He was ranked amongst the top 50 chief information officers by several magazines and institutions between 2005 and 2009, including the CIO magazine in the US, Information Week US, etc. I'll also like to say that having worked closely with Ashish for many years now, Ashish has held several responsibilities with the Reliance Group, but probably the most interesting fact which very few people know about him is that he was also the first CEO of the Mumbai Indian cricket team. So he comes from a really, really diverse background. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Mr. Ashish Chauhan.
Thank you, Mr. Sampath, Mr. Saxena, friends, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to be in front of you. Basically, I think the people who are attending are already into the CSR activity, or they are hugely aware compared to me. So telling them about CSR is very difficult. There is very little I can tell you new about the CSR part of it. But the topic was sustainability and CSR. So I'll touch upon a little bit of CSR, a little bit of sustainability. If you look at the name CSR, it's basically about corporate social responsibility. And many times we think the corporates and social responsibility are two unconnected words. They are oxymoron. They don't make sense together. That usually the corporates are not responsible. And that is basically due to variety of reasons. But one of the issues which the modern world has faced over the last 600 years, the first corporates started coming up in the 14th century, towards the end of 14th century. And they were basically a huge improvement, a huge innovation in the history of mankind. The limited liability company, what you now know as corporates, is a tremendous social innovation which has brought the world to the level that we are today. Throughout the human history, more than 10,000 years, 20,000 years, most people lived in abject poverty. 13th century was not an exception. 14th century was not an exception. Less than 1% people in each society used to live life lavishly. The rest 99.5% people used to live in abject poverty as servants in servitude and so on and so forth. The corporates, when they came up, they came up like a breath of fresh air. They allowed people, before the limited liability company came up, the concept of doing business was unlimited liability. Unlimited liability ensured that you couldn't collaborate with people, you couldn't expand, because if something happens, something fails, you will be a defaulter, you will be bankrupt, and all your house, your family, everything will be taken away from you. And limited liability concept came in that context. And basically from 14th century onwards, it has been a huge success. Corporates have been responsible for the lifestyle we now live. In most parts of the world, barring India and few others which are still developing, most parts of the world, most people now live in reasonable conditions. And that is largely due to the corporates who have basically worked together, advanced the cause of the society, and so on and so forth. But the corporates have also been responsible for great bad. You have seen some of the movies. I remember one of the movies where some plant was carcinogenic and it was creating the cancer in people who were working there and around the plant and so on and so. I forget the name of the movie. So, but effectively, the corporates have also attracted huge bad publicity. One of the largest situations in badness was relating to India. There's a company called East India Company that was set up for trading with India. Instead of trading with India, they subjugated India, and basically we became we were under British rule for a very long period just because of the British East India Company was set up. In a sense, the companies have been responsible for doing great bad. But overall, if you look at the history and also the evidence, that corporates usually together have done a great job for the mankind. And that's why, for me, I just wanted to give you a historical perspective that corporates are doing a great job. They have done some bad, and we need to ensure that the bad keeps on coming down and good keeps on actually going up. And that's why corporates have to do it. Why you and me would not have to do it. Interestingly, you and me also do it, but corporates are even more interesting because they are not natural entities. They are not living entities. They are not cats, they are not dogs, they are not humans. They are artificial entities which are created out of a social contract. There is an act called Companies Act, which allows creation of that company. And who runs it? Humans. But they are still artificial entities. The people who are running the companies are agents of the company. They are not company. And there is a very fine distinction. Many owners of the companies don't understand that. Many managers of the companies don't understand. But company is not the people who run it. Companies are distinct entities. They come out as artificial entities. They come out of the social contract. And any such thing which is doing bad, which is doing more bad, or is not adding value to the society, society may not like it. Society may actually make it irrelevant in most benign way, or society may close it down, that activity. And that's why corporates need to reinvent themselves every time, every century, every decade on how to become relevant. 25, 30 years back, when I came into the workforce, the biggest issues with corporates was about the corporate democracy. That is, the owner-managers were running the companies as if it was their private fiefdom, and other shareholders who had invested money were basically not allowed to have any information. There was a huge asymmetry of information. Today, most of the debate is now about social responsibility. The stakeholder then was very narrowly defined. That is, people who own shares in that company. East India Company shareholders were hugely benefited by investing in East India Company. But stakeholders who were sitting in India, people who were ruled by East India Company, were not so benefited. But that time, the corporate democracy and corporate social responsibility was basically promoting the benefits of the people who own shares in the company. In the last 25 years, the world has moved so fast. Today, every politician wants to also talk about gas pricing, talk about many things. This is basically the society asking each stakeholder that you have a stake in this company. Whether you are a supplier, whether you are a vendor, whether you are a person staying near the company's plant. Of course, we have heard of Bhopal tragedy, Union Carbide. That's also another situation. So if you are staying near the plant, you have a huge risk. Similarly, if you are a consumer of the company's goods or services, you also have a stake. Every stakeholder is now basically asking for its pound of flesh. And if the time changes, the first Companies Act in India was established in 1850. Then when we became independent in 1947, a new act was passed, which was perhaps the same old act with little minor changes. It was called Indian Companies Act 1956, which is almost similar to 1850 Act. And then you have a new Companies Act 2013. The times have changed, but the act did not change. almost more than 150 years or 170 years. That became irrelevant. The society has moved forward, and that's why it had to be sort of changed in a way that it remains relevant to the society. And that's why the New Companies Act has many things. Many of us are not happy with what is written there, but at least one thing is sure, that society's expectations, aspirations are in a sense coming out, and one of that is that 2% of the profits of companies beyond a particular size has to be spent on corporate social responsibility. It is the need of the time, it's the demand of the time, and in democracies, ultimately government is of the people, for the people, by the people. That had to listen and bring this in. Now, there are many, many social sector schemes which government runs. Billions of dollars are spent on many things. And how is it that this 14,000 crore, 15,000 crore that is going to be spent is going to be more important than other things? How is it that the government is taking that 2% which rightfully belongs to the shareholders, giving it out to the society? It's making a law. India is practically the first country in the world which has come out with this law of 2% CSR spend on a profits. It's huge. Why is it happening? And why that 15,000 crore or 14,000 crore is going to make a huge difference? It's because corporates are used to spending their energy to get the best solutions at the lowest cost. And there is a perception in policy making areas, in political circles, in NGOs, saying the same corporates who are so good in pursuit of profit, if they use a little energy on the pursuit of social good, that 15,000 crore will act as a huge catalyst for bringing good to India. And that is where it's going to be a new world going forward. BSE has been doing a lot of work over last 140 years since it was set up. But more importantly, it is now working with the government, Indian Institute of Corporate Affairs, which is a division of Ministry of Corporate Affairs, to measure each company which is listed and is supposed to do that contribute to CSR in the projects. We are coming out with guidelines to ensure that the CSR framework is fully adhered to, and each company is ranked or measured vis-a-vis certain benchmarks that is going to be there. Totally, stock exchanges are in a sense regulators, in a sense marketplaces. They can play a role of sort of demonstrator. We are regulators, so we can come out with regulations, but we can also act as people who can nudge and push, who can demonstrate a little bit. So recently, 2-3 years back, we came out with 2 indices. One is called BSE Carbon X, other is called BSE Green X. It measures the company's pollution, creating activity vis-a-vis their peers and so on and so forth, and changes their weight in the index, so that if a company is polluting more vis-a-vis their peer group, then their weightage in the index comes down. And I was also a little skeptical about the usage or effectiveness of such a tool to motivate people. But in one of such discussion forums, a conference, one of the largest company in India, their chairman approached me saying, "Mr. Chauhan, I have something to tell you." And he said, "But my company does so much on greenhouse emission, and you are giving me lower rank, and you have reduced our weight. And so we have a question to ask you." And I said, "Have you put it in public domain, whatever you are doing? Has it been certified? Is it part of your annual report?" And he said, "No." I said, "Then whatever you do in your home and nobody knows, we don't take into account. What we take into account is what you put on your website, what you put on your annual report, what is for everyone to see and say that it's happening or not. You may be doing a great job. So next year, if you put in whatever you are doing in your CSR activities or in sustainable activities, please put that in, and we will certainly sort of take this into account." So somewhere, some of these tools which look a little flimsy, little odd in terms of motivating people, all the corporate leaders, they want to be the best. And so many of them also want to be the best in CSR activities. It's in their blood to compete, and so many of them also want to compete in CSR, and I think it's a good race to run. It brings that goodness of corporates out and also makes them more relevant to the society they operate in. There is something called GRI, and there is something called CDP reporting, which is basically greenhouse carbon reporting and all. There are 80 companies in India that report. We have 5,500 companies listed on BSE, largest in the world. Next large exchange in the world is less than half our size. Only 80 companies report, and somewhere on the line, we need to have more such reporting. Of course, the cost of reporting has to come down because many times the cost is prohibitively high for meeting those standards. In the world, almost totally the market capitalization of the companies listed is in the range of 50 to 80 trillion dollars. India is already 1.6 trillion, but the amount of wealth that is represented on exchanges is humongous. And exchanges can play a great role in motivating the people in different ways, by indices, by regulations, by monitoring them, and so on and so forth, in taking them for sustainable activities, because if we can't sustain the earth for long, then even human race may not be able to survive long. So we need to worry about the carbon emissions, pollution, and so on and so forth. The other side is about many of the goods that we need to do for the society now. That includes creating jobs. For me, India's biggest issue for next 20 years, biggest job for next 20 years is to create jobs. India needs to create 1.5 crore, that is 15 million new jobs every year for next 20 years. 30 crore new jobs. Now, most of us are used to hearing these numbers if you are in India. 1.5 crore is almost the population of entire continent called Australia. 1.5 crore is larger than US's total unemployment. When you watch CNBC or Bloomberg or something in your spare time, when the unemployment rate is supposed to come out, market goes up or down, right? The total unemployment is 1.5 crore or less, okay, around 1.3 crores in US. We have to create 1.5 crore new jobs every year for next 20 years. It's a humongous task. And that has to come out of skilling, that has to come out of setting up entrepreneurs, because in modern world, the government cannot create these jobs. These jobs will be created by private sector. And private sector, how do they get funding from? They get funding from banks, and they get funding from stock exchanges. In a sense, the stock exchanges are playing a great role in getting the funds available to the corporates so that they can create jobs. So, but over and above that, they have to also continue to prove that they are doing things in the interest of the nation, in the interest of the society they operate in. With that, I would like to thank all of you, and also Dun & Bradstreet for coming today early in the morning. Really appreciate listening to me.
Thanks very much, Ashish. Our next speaker for this session belongs to a group that is synonymous with both CSR as well as sustainability in India, the Tata Group. Dr. Yogendra Saxena is the Chief Sustainability Officer of Tata Power. He holds a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from the Harvard Butler Technological